Good morning, everyone. I'm Michael Poliakoff, the president of the American Council of Trustees and Alumni, and it is ACTA's honor to host this webinar. Why is that? Because when we support you in your work to fulfill the fiduciary duty that you took upon yourselves when you joined your boards, ACTA is fulfilling its mission. That fiduciary duty, of course, starts with having full information for the decisions that the board alone can make. And I will interject that it's preposterous that a plan of the magnitude of this Big Ten plan could be implemented without the full knowledge, engagement, and approval of the universities involved. After all, trustees, regents, whatever they may be named, have the ultimate responsibility for everything that happens at the university. Trustees and regents will delegate, but they can never delegate away their awesome responsibility. The prime directive that my colleague, Chief of Staff Armand Alacbay, and I were both on boards of visitors at universities in Virginia was to read and study the documents pertaining to our schools and their operations, and to demand the information we need if it isn't readily provided. The Secretary of Education, Armand, if I'm not mistaken, used that very word, demand that information. So here we are. ACTA, I want to be clear, has no dog in this fight concerning the content of the proposal. Boards can accept it or reject it. They could go out for competitive bids, but these must be board decisions that are based on complete information with adequate time to do all the things that due diligence requires. Read and study, consult with outside counsel. The process that we're seeing here from ACTA's perspective is an inherently flawed process. And we turn this over to you, the fiduciaries of your institutions, to be able to fulfill your obligations by having that information first and making decisions that are based on your studied reflection. And now I want to introduce my colleague, ACTA's Chief of Staff, Armand Alacbay.
Thank you, Michael. I just want to thank each of the regents and trustees who have demonstrated the courage here today to lead this conversation. Tom McMillen, Regent, University of Maryland. Sarah Hubbard, Regent, University of Michigan. Jay Paterno, Trustee, Penn State University. James Farnsworth, Regent, University of Minnesota. And joining us later, Jeff Smulyan, Trustee, University of Southern California. As anyone who served on a university governing board knows, it is a heavy responsibility. Our purpose here is to facilitate a conversation about what responsible, informed governance should look like. When ACTA conducts board trainings, I use the analogy that serving on a governing board is like being part of the ownership group of a professional sports franchise. In either case, if you're doing things the right way, you have no direct role in what your team does on the field. You shouldn't be calling plays, running practices, or drafting players based on their Madden ratings. But you do need to pay attention to everything that's part of the franchise, because you'll be the one left holding the bag if things ever do go sideways. If there's any sports owner whose attitude you might want to emulate, it would be Carly Ursay-Gordon of the Indianapolis Colts, known for walking the sidelines during games while listening in on a coach's headset. When Sports Illustrated asked her why she does this, she wisely replied, "I would suggest it for anyone else who has to pay head coaches and GMs millions and millions of dollars. It helps you make a less expensive mistake." So with that, a little bit of housekeeping. We'll start off with some comments from each of our panelists. Dr. Poliakoff will moderate, kick off with one question, and then we'll also open up the floor to a Q&A in the chat below. There should be a bar at the bottom of your screen where you can submit written questions that we'll ask the panelists. So with that, Tom, please, the floor is yours.
Well, thank you, Armand and Michael and ACTA. I just really want to express my appreciation for your leadership on this issue and every other issue that comes before you. What's particularly interesting about this issue is that, it really is future looking in the sense that what we're doing today will have tremendous consequences in the future because, if boards punt today, invariably they're going to punt tomorrow when the consequences are even greater. So, I serve on the University of Maryland board. I'm not going to talk a lot about my experience on that in this process, but I will say a couple things that I've learned by talking to trustees across the Big Ten. First, it's shocking to me that a decision of this magnitude, that there are no opposing views presented. Even the president of the United States, and this literally every president, when they have a major decision to make regarding a military action or something, the generals come in and present the president the pros, the cons, the risks on those decisions. And yet, universally, in my discussions with trustees across the Big Ten, no trustee has been given a balanced view of the pluses on this deal and the negatives. And so I think that's really a major, major flaw as far as I'm concerned, because we all should have the right to have independent third-party experts come in, not third-party experts that the Big Ten brings in, third-party experts that the boards independently bring in to help us evaluate these transactions. And I can only say that that's going to be imperative as a model for the future. The second point I'd like to make is that we really have to think about the long-term consequences of these arrangements, whether it's reprisals from Congress or just the long-term economic consequences of locking in something this important to 2045. And, as we all know, presidents come and go. Presidents rarely last a decade. Yet these universities have to live with decisions that are made by presidents and boards. And so I think it's critical, because of the long-term consequences of these decisions, that regents and trustees discharge their fiduciary duty. And so that's why I'm particular keen on this issue. There are so many issues in college sports, so many related things that we could talk about. What's the impact on all the other schools in college sports from the Big Ten doing this? What will this mean to their tax status with potential looming congressional legislation that could imperil their tax position? Are we addressing the spiraling costs in college sports? The costs that are going out of sight. The fact that, $200 million is being paid out to coaches who are fired and unsuccessful. And the fact that a majority of the Big Ten schools are having to borrow from their university to stay in business in their athletic department. So there are so many issues here that we can talk about. And I think it's important that we really stand up for the rights of trustees. And I can say universally, in talking to the trustees, and I've talked to many of them, that it's the paucity of information here, the lack of information, the very careful rationing of information by the Big Ten, which is extremely troublesome. Because if this deal is as good as it's proclaimed to be, why is there this fear of sharing this information, going through a good governance process? That I cannot understand. Whether you're relying on Zoom meetings and trying to ration information, boards should be able to sit down and get whatever they want to make a decision. And I think, Michael and Armand, you've clearly said that. There should be nothing off limits for us to make a decision, an informed decision about this matter. This is important today, but it will be even more important to the future. So again, I really appreciate ACTA's leadership on this matter.
Thank you, Tom. Sarah.
Well, thanks, Tom. You said many very important things that I think many of us will agree with already. And so I don't want to be overly redundant here, but it absolutely is uh, an important role for all of us as board members to be engaged in. I think in the past we viewed as athletics as something that, um, you know, was important to our schools. Certainly, the front porch of the university, the way that a lot of people learn about us, but it's become material from a financial standpoint as well as reputational. And so, what is happening at the conference level, I think, has raised to a level that does obligate boards to provide oversight. And that's really the point here of our discussion today, is to encourage everybody to use the fiduciary duty you've been granted to, in fact, provide that oversight and engage and understand what's happening at the conference level. The conference, at least in my experience, typically things that have happened at the conference, including expansion a couple of times of the conference, have happened without any knowledge of the board. And we found out, after the fact, and we're, maybe informed, but maybe informed after the media found out. And I think those kinds of activities at the conference level really should be more in the purview of the board without the board micromanaging that, but certainly having a fiduciary role to play in providing oversight on whether it's right for your university or not. Because the numbers are so significant now. The amount of revenue is so significant now. We know the deal on the table is an upfront payment of around $2.4 billion to the league, divided largely up amongst the members of the conference. And I'm not here to talk about the details of that, but that's real money to all of us. And we wouldn't make decisions otherwise at a board level. We wouldn't allow that to happen otherwise without us making a decision at a board level. We're required at the University of Michigan to vote on things publicly that are far less consequential to the university than this. Yet we don't have a formal role in this discussion of whether we should grant our rights, which is an incredibly valuable asset of the university and something that boards should feel obligated to provide oversight on. So that's, the inspiration for why I'm looking at it and taking a longer look at it, and my colleagues are taking a longer look at it. And this idea of having independent evaluation is something we're taking very seriously as well. But this lack of transparency and information for the fiduciaries at our universities is unacceptable, and something that I would certainly encourage my colleagues across, not just the Big Ten, across the country, to insist on, as far as receiving information that's needed to make a good decision to steer your university in the right direction.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Jay.
Okay, let me just state first and foremost, just so with our bylaws, that what I'm about to express is my own personal opinion. I don't represent the opinion of the board. I don't represent the opinion of Penn State. And what I'm going to do is just kind of give you some insight. So, 1994, I'm at a used bookstore in New Haven, Connecticut, and I see a book called Touchdown by Amos Alonzo Stagg, first edition, 1927 book. And for those who don't know, Amos Alonzo Stagg was the head coach of the University of Chicago from 1892 to 1932 when the Big Ten started. But one of the things that struck me as I read the book were some of the same themes that now, 30 years after I bought the book, are relevant. He talked about the big money involved in college athletics. He talked about administrators at universities being frightened by the idea that 80,000 fans would show up for a game and have a $500,000 gate for a game between Chicago and Michigan, for example, which, by the way, in today's dollars, is about $9.3 million. He also talked about mercenary players that were never even enrolled in some of the schools they were at. They were being paid to play by alumni and boosters. They jumped from school to school. Ivy League schools were involved in this. This wasn't just rogue institutions. He was worried about a threat to the academic integrity to the schools. If you took that and wrote that right now, it would sound very, very familiar and very much at home at where we are. And I think right now, we as fiduciaries or universities have to understand that governance is the issue. This issue with the private capital deal is just one of many issues in which we better provide oversight or governance as we go forward. It's a time of massive change in college athletics beyond just this deal. We have to be honest about what we're doing now. You're talking about $1.1 billion a year right now in media rights that we get for the Big Ten. This is not an extracurricular activity that we do in the afternoon for dear old state anymore. This is real money. And we have to be honest about that and what the threats to what real money can do in terms of people's integrity. Things being decided, if you start to look at it, what is being decided here? Things that are being decided right now. A private capital deal is being decided. The future of our association with the NCAA is being decided in real time right now. The College Sports Commission, there's an enforcement arm of that, to which the Big Ten has not signed on yet because we're opposed to postseason sanctions. Playoff expansion. The House settlement with the NCAA has committed us to millions and millions of dollars, hundreds of millions of dollars. Those things that are still ahead of us. And again, all of those things, we did not have any input as a board. The things that are still ahead of us, employment status of our student athletes. One of the things that's not been talked about is that, student athletes will be signing contracts with Big Ten enterprises. Collective bargaining is a possibility. How do we feel about that as boards and committing to ourselves? Gambling issues. The NCAA has voted to allow student athletes to gamble on pro sports. There's a gambling scandal coming in our future, and we have not been at the wheel driving where this goes. There's federal legislation on NCAA sports, on broadcast rights, all these things that are going on. Our conference is running ads advocating for some of this legislation and telling fans to call their legislators. Those are all things that the Big Ten is deciding. But right now, in higher education, relates to athletics, the world is watching. The coaching buyout, the massive amount of coaching buyouts is catching people's attention, especially state legislators, for those of us at public institutions. Massive amounts of debt for facilities. A school like Penn State, we're looking at potentially being $800 million in borrowing in athletics alone for facilities. And while academics is under huge pressure, people see that as not having a fiduciary responsibility. Expenses in athletics have gone through the roof. If you go back 15 years ago, Penn State's football budget, total expenses was $21.5 million. It's now $65 million. We now spend more money in our football budget than we bring in ticket sales and concessions and parking. We are completely reliant on television revenues, and we have passed the point where television revenues are outstrip what we get playing games and selling tickets and going to bowl games. As I mentioned, salaries have exploded. Now, all these things are things that have been going on. And if we look back years from now and see that we have bankrupted our university because of athletics, we will be the ones to blame. As Tom mentioned, and certainly Michigan understands, presidents are moving around faster than they ever have. Athletic directors are moving around, coaches are moving around. And so the repercussions of these decisions are things that we as board members and future board members will have to deal with. What is needed right now is to update some bylaws, because right now our bylaws for a place like Penn State only covers real estate transactions. We need to understand, if you go back 40 years ago, ESPN bought up real estate in the form of satellite access. Those became very real assets, and they're essentially assets. And we need to update to represent a new reality as to what assets are worth what and what we have something to do about. And I'll conclude by this. I wrote a book called Blitzed. Okay, it's a novel, but it's based on things that are really going on. I just finished about a year ago. And there's a story in there where the head football coach is dealing with new realities. And he's meeting with people in a collective. And he says, let me get this straight. So you want to pay my players to promote a collective that will raise money to pay them to promote a collective that will raise money to pay them. He said, this seems like money laundering. And everybody goes quiet in the scene. That's a very real conversation that happened with a Power Four coach, not here at Penn State, somewhere else. But these are the things that we are not paying attention to, that we better start. No one is saying we should be hiring coaches or looking at quarterback depth charts or anything like that. But we better understand that we have a fiduciary and an obligation for the integrity of our institutions right now to take a look at what is going on. And within boards and within administrations and every organization, there are three types of people. There are lawyers, liars, and truth tellers. People that will just flat out lie to get what they want. There are people that will always tell you the truth no matter where it lands. And there are lawyers that know exactly what's going on, but may only tell you what it is if asked. We need more truth tellers because we have a lot of people that would go into the lawyer category right now. And if we don't ask the questions and if we don't get the information that we need, we will regret it 5 years from now, 10 years from now, and 20 years from now.
James.
Good morning, everyone. And it's a hard act to follow, actually a hard act to follow from everybody. But I'm grateful to be part of this conversation. And like Jay said, here as an individual regent, I'm not representing our whole board or the university, but really value the chance to be a part of this conversation today. I don't have a ton to add because quite frankly, all of my fellow regents and trustees have made excellent spot on comments, framing why we're here in this discussion today. And for me, thinking about this, this is really about, as others have said, our fiduciary duty as regents, as trustees, within this national lens, with what's happening in the Big Ten. It's about having oversight and foresight into the long term of our collective future as the Big Ten. As someone I've been serving for a little over 4.5 years on the board of the University of Minnesota, and it's been very interesting to me just watching various issues that are happening at the conference level, watching various issues as a board in general when it comes to intercollegiate athletics. And I think Jay talked a little bit about this in terms of board policies and how oftentimes we're not even not just at the Big Ten level, finding out about finding out about decisions and different big decisions after the fact, but also maybe not having that institutional lens as well, because a lot of things for oversight of intercollegiate athletics have been delegated. And so I think this is a really important time. I think it's important that we're all being able to be in conversation and be in community and learning from one another. Of course, as was framed at the beginning, today's conversation is about governance. It's about sharing information. It's about raising awareness. And every institution will certainly be approaching the details of this particular deal differently. But it's about us all having an opportunity to do our due diligence. And clearly that is not filtering, the information and things to help us do our due diligence is not filtering out via the channels that they should be. And so I'm grateful to ACTA for creating this space to allow us to have this conversation, learn together, ask questions, because this is certainly a major thing for the future for so many clear reasons. And of course, a core role of governance is looking from a strategic lens, taking that long-term view from a strategic lens. And we need to be able to do that individually at our respective institutions with the details of what's going on, but also collectively. So really appreciate this opportunity today and looking forward to that continued conversation.
Thank you. And Jeff.
I don't want to reiterate what Tom and Sarah and James have said. I think we all agree that we absolutely have to be engaged in the governance of our universities. We have a fiduciary duty to do that. So I totally agree with that. But I want to take a little different approach today. First, I want to note I'm speaking on behalf of USC as an individual trustee, not on behalf of the entire university. That's the province of our president and our board chair. But as a trustee, let me state that I'm proud we're a member of the Big Ten, certainly because of its leading tradition in athletics, but more important for its leadership in academic excellence and in research that has improved the lives of millions of people throughout this country and the world. It's that leadership that I believe the Big Ten must provide today. Let me explain. College football is America's most popular sport, not only behind the NFL. Only behind the NFL. Having spent a lifetime in media, I can tell you that means it's the second most valuable content in America, growing more valuable every day. It's why the NFL, with $14 billion of annual revenues, wants to renegotiate its contracts years early because it believes it can get over $20 billion annually. It's why the NBA, with half of the consumer preference of college football, gets $7 billion per year, nearly twice the revenue of college football. The reason is simple. Colleges compete against each other, conference versus conference, and the result is a system that dramatically values college football. The estimates based on audience share are that college football should be getting $9 to $13 billion if it negotiated as one entity. This is where the leadership of the Big Ten needs to come in. The Big Ten should lead in uniting all of college football in solving this problem, not trying to solve it by further withdrawing from the rest of America and taking private equity-like investments and diluting its value. Even if college football only reached the bottom level of these estimates, $9 billion annually, think of what that could mean for our football student athletes, our Olympic athletes, our non-revenue athletes, and our fiscally challenged athletic departments. The current crisis in intercollegiate athletics would be solved. Every university in America would benefit from our leadership, yet the Big Ten would be the prime beneficiary because media dollars will follow audience, as they always have, and the Big Ten will provide more audience than anyone else. Now is the time for the conference to lead, as it has always led, and find a national solution that intercollegiate athletics desperately needs. I know many schools need revenues now, and we can find those revenues now without selling a critical piece of our future. As trustees, we have a fiduciary duty to be engaged in the governance of our universities. It is critical to the future of our education that we do so. The Big Ten has always provided America leadership. Now is the time to do it again. Thank you.
Thank you all for really, really cogent insights, which I'm sure others listening to this webinar will greatly appreciate. I'm just going to take one liberty as moderator to articulate a hope, much like what you have said, Jeff, that what will come out of this controversy will be far more engaged boards all over the nation that will recognize that they have a particular responsibility now, especially with all of the federal engagement with colleges and universities. It is not a time when they can be complacent or under-informed, and need, when necessary, to make it clear that they are the final arbiters of what happens at the university. And to be specific, that the president or chancellor answers to them. I would hope that one very specific thing will come out of this, that every college and university board would have an athletics oversight committee in order to give very precise, very timely information to the whole of the board. Well, with that, I have one question for all of our panelists, and then we're going to engage in answering questions that are coming in from the rest of our viewers. And that is, what's your strategy for making sure that your fellow board members are up to speed on what is going on? And how do you encourage them to be active and outspoken on this matter? So anyone, please.
Take a step, only because I want to reiterate the comments made by Jeff and Jay that we're speaking here individually today, not on behalf of our universities. We are speaking here kind of trying to share our experiences on this broader issue involving college sport. With the trustees at my university, I try to talk to them, I call them, I communicate with them, I send things to them. It's a difficult process when you don't open up the process in a more comprehensive fashion. So it's a challenge, but the best way to do it is build relationships Our board has turned quite a bit because of new appointments. That makes it more difficult. But it's communication and trying to reach out and try to educate. And that's why I really commend you today, Michael, for doing this. I mean, this is an attempt to educate trustees and regents.
Others, James, Sarah, Jay, Jeff?
I don't have a problem getting my colleagues to speak up on this issue. So, we only have 8 people on our board, so it's much easier to communicate amongst us and we make decisions together. And we have been in contact with each other on this issue, not just daily, almost hourly, since we first heard about it. And this is something that we communicate with each other about a lot, and that we have decided to have some independence on as far as our oversight and seeking more information, not only insisting on getting the information we need to evaluate this, but bringing in outside independent third-party people to provide additional analysis for us to review.
Yeah, we're different. We're private, so we don't have the constraints that most of the rest of you in the Big Ten have. And we've been able to have trustees who have subject matter expertise, who've worked together very closely with our president and our board chair, and it's been a great experience. And we've all come to a conclusion, that we feel pretty strongly about.
I'll jump in. We have a 36-member board, which is very, very big and very, very tough to communicate with everyone. A lot of the things that we can, if we want to get something to everybody member of the board, we generally have to go through the board secretary, who then will send it out via email. But when we have our board meetings, there's a lot of one-on-one meetings, discussions and things. And what struck me just from a personal experience was this past weekend, we had our board meetings, and the number of trustees that still feel they don't have any information or feel very well not informed at all about what's going on with this deal. Like many other people in the Big Ten, we had a briefing with the commissioner of the Big Ten, and we got one slide that had 5 lines on it. Probably the same slide all of you saw, and then we're supposed to walk away and say, "Hey, we feel great about this." Seemed very rushed. But there have been a number of people, because of my experience in athletics from a career standpoint, have asked me for information, opinions, and whatever. And it's been interesting to see that there are a number of us that feel the same way, that there are some, we'd like more information. I want to thank Michael and everybody active for getting this together, because in getting to talk to some trustees of other schools and now getting to know some new ones, I think it's been really helpful. And I appreciate Jeff's comments about the Big Ten being a leader, because that is why Penn State, we kind of broke open the whole conference realignment back in 1989. And a friend of mine's father was the chancellor of, or I guess president of Illinois. My dad, Joe Paterno, the AD and the president of Penn State, flew out in a private plane to have lunch at his house so no one would know about it. And my friend was told by his parents, "You cannot tell anybody who was at our house, or you will be grounded forever." So, I mean, the Big Ten has been a leadership, and one of the attractions was the academic side of it. But I think we're all in the same boat on this one. And I think communication amongst within our own boards and amongst other boards, I think, is going to be a real positive coming out of us.
Yeah, I don't have a ton to add, other than we have a lot of constraints, as folks are familiar with sunshine laws and such. So I just, again, speaking personally, I think awareness of what's happening in the Big Ten and athletics in general is an area of growth for our board. I'm obviously interested in it. Again, really, really value this conversation today. I think there's a tendency perhaps to wait for information to come down versus being really proactively engaged in this. So but just echo that's a reason why communication is even more important.
So, well, again, thank you all. And I do want to reiterate something that several of you have said, that you're speaking in your individual capacity. But the fact that you are speaking across university lines with others is something that's extremely valuable. So that those who are following this path of, dare I say, demanding the information that you need are not alone. And the networking of engaged trustees is one of those things that Active very much values as part of its mission. Well, Armand, I think we probably are getting some questions in.
So yeah, so if I may, I have one question to ask before we send it to the Active staff. I've been fielding questions from the audience, and just a reminder to everybody watching, there's the Q&A function. You can submit your written questions through there, and they'll get into the queue. But one of the responsibilities of being a trustee is maintaining the public trust in the institution, right? It's in the name. And Tom, I know you mentioned that sports is really the front porch of the institution, right? It's the way that so many people outside of the university are able to interface with it for the first time, oftentimes. What does that kind of concept of public trust, how does that concept of public trust feed into your decision making, the questions you ask, and just kind of the way you approach the job? Tom, you're on mute.
No, I said it before. I think this is, the role of a regent or trustee is a difficult one, because sometimes you have to stand alone, and because you believe in something. And I don't know enough about the merits of this decision to say good or bad, but I do know that if universities boards are not fully engaged, this consequentially for the future is very, very extreme. So I look at it from the standpoint that I think this is extremely important for higher education and where we're going as a nation. I think Jay made a really interesting point, and I think it's very true. The thing that's going to blow this party up in the next few years is a major gambling scandal across our campuses. And I've said this time and time again. And so, when that happens, and it's not a question of if, it's just when it will happen, people are going to look at boards like us and say, where were you? Where were you when all these consequential decisions were made? And so that's why I feel an obligation, because we don't want history to look back and say, were you asleep at the wheel when our most valuable assets in America, our institutions of higher learning, really, really suffered extraordinary damage because of an experiment that America started, 150 years ago, which is to put big time sports and school together, education together. And so we have an enormous responsibility to make sure that noble and unique experiment works for now and works for decades to come.
I'll say for the University of Michigan, our regents are elected statewide, and I know that's different than most across the country. And so, the confidence and trust we have with the public is a little different than some of our colleagues in other places, but we take that very seriously. We run statewide. 2.5 million people voted for me in 2020, and it's a different approach, I think, and really responsibility that we feel to the people of Michigan, not just to the administration or to our governor. And that's something that's a level of public trust that we won't break, and that we think of on every decision we make. And this decision as well is so important to everyone.
And before we turn to the questions, I want to say with great pride that Tom McMillen was our very first recipient way back in, I can't even remember the year, of the Martin Prize for Excellence in Trusteeship, for his willingness as an individual to stand up for the important role of the trustee in decision making. And our most recent one is Sarah Hubbard, for the excellent work that the University of Michigan has done in standing up for institutional neutrality and freedom of speech. We value these things. We want them recognized, and we want the public to appreciate what kind of trusteeship you have exemplified. That's not to leave the rest of you out, of this, but
We're slackers.
Well, it looks like we do have some questions rolling in, so I'll send this over to the active staff and fire away.
Thank you, Armand. We will go ahead and kick off the Q&A portion of today's call. Unless I specifically say so, let's just assume all of these questions are open to all of the panelists on the board to just jump in and answer how you see fit. The first question we've received is, what do you feel is the real reason for all of the secrecy behind this vote?
I'll jump in.
Yeah. Go for it, Jay.
I don't know. That's the problem. We don't know. If it is such a great deal, then show us the deal and let's go. More information. If I had something that I believed was really great, I'd tell you everything I could about it. I'd show you everything about it and say, tell me what I should do. So that is probably my own personally biggest concern. Like show me the cards.
If I could add something to that as moderator and the voice of ACTA, my predecessor, Ann Neal, who was president, used to emphasize trustees are not potted plants decorating the stage at commencement. They are not walking checkbooks or piggy banks. They are not there to be seat warmers at football games. They're fiduciaries. And the reason she said that so polemically is that there has been a very deadly marginalization of trustees. And what you are doing is to push back against that. And that is an absolutely crucial thing to be doing in this environment.
And let me just clarify one thing. I don't know this is a good deal. I don't know that it's a bad deal. I don't know what kind of deal it is. And I just want to know what kind of deal it is so that we can give the right advice.
Great, thank you. Our next question says that the Council of Presidents and Chancellors have been the fiduciary board of the Big Ten since 1952. Most members delegate their votes directly to their president or chancellor. For the schools that don't delegate, are there dollar triggers for boards of trustees and regents to get involved? Do trustees and regents make these decisions and then direct the president? Basically, how granular do boards get in oversight, and how is that governed / decided?
Well, I'll just say on our behalf, I've been on our board since January 2021. There have been some expansions and things. We've had no oversight until this moment in this issue. I couldn't tell you for sure if the delegation is clear in our bylaws, but certainly it's been our standard operating procedure to allow the athletic director and president to handle these decisions and inform us later. But I think on this particular item, the dollars have become so big that we believe that we're obligated to provide oversight. We haven't indicated a specific threshold on that. It's something certainly to think about how to go forward in that regard, but I can tell you other items in our bylaws where we are required to have public votes at a certain threshold are way lower than what this requires.
Yeah, I would add in something very similar. I've been engaging on this exact question because of this issue, and we have in our board policy some more vague language than I would like, and this has all been discovered through this, so that needs to be addressed moving forward around oversight of intercollegiate athletics. There's the Big Ten COPC, and votes at the Big Ten are not specifically named, but we have been delegating by practice. Is the term that was told to me. And obviously, because of this, need to look at that differently moving forward. And to Sarah's point, we've got a lot lower thresholds for many things in our board policies. So,
in Maryland's case, obviously our Attorney General has said that our statutes and bylaws are probably insufficient, and that the president can make the decision. It's a very interesting issue, because I think, as Jeff Smulyan said, this is a big issue for college sports, and the impact of this on a lot of other schools in Maryland who are part of the Division I. We have a number of those schools that, here we are a system. We represent 13 schools, and we have a number of them in D1, but we're really basically letting College Park make this decision. So it's very interesting when you look at it from the broad perspective. I think Jeff did a very good job of articulating why the Big Ten should show leadership on looking at college sports writ large, as opposed to in the narrow scope of just 18 institutions.
I think I'll jump in. As you guys have all said, I think the bylaws that we have on our books are insufficient for reality of now, and don't reflect the times. I think probably allowing that we give the presidents a right to vote on certain things probably needs, just without any input, probably needs a change. And then, quite frankly, we're at a point now where we're talking about creating a for-profit company using what essentially are public dollars from schools like Penn State and Maryland and Michigan, and that are public institutions. So I think that's something that should come to a board level. And I think we're probably at the point now where college athletics is going to need a constitutional, really a convention to rewrite how we run the entire operation nationally, because of all these things. We're just reacting to the latest lawsuit and the latest ruling right now, even with the House versus the NCAA settlement. That'll stand until somebody who's a 10th grader right now sues and says, well, I wasn't part of that class action suit, and I'm not party to your revenue sharing cap. So we really need to do that. And I think there's no question that governing board members should be involved in reshaping. This is a very existential situation as it relates to, this is just one of many issues that we got to deal with.
This next question comes for Sarah and Jeff, with the understanding that they're both here today to speak for themselves, not on behalf of their full boards. But would you be willing to share some key bullet points that are causing you to be opposed to this deal?
Sure. And I appreciate the question. And there's been some very public comments in the media from members of our board, and public comments at our previous board meeting from my colleagues and I. So I think that's out there if anyone wants to look those up. But I'd say in general, the concerns are not just about the issues of transparency, although those certainly are concerns, but are issues of how far in the distance we're making this decision without really having great information, delegation of rights that really doesn't happen until 2036. That's certainly an issue. We're trying to better understand why we would do this so soon. And of course, that relates specifically to items in the deal and whether it is the best deal available. But fundamental questions too about whether an outside investor is appropriate to be doing this kind of activity with the Big Ten and with something so valuable. That's a very fundamental question before you even get into the issues of whether it's a good deal or a bad deal. Is this the right approach for universities, for public, in our case, public universities, to engage in relative to our athletics department and something so important to the university and to our brand? Is this what we want to do? So those are a few high level items, but there are also a lot of details that we're still unpacking relative to governance of the Big Ten, relative to what's right for Michigan in this deal, relative to our decision making versus the decision making of others in the Big Ten, decision making by the league and of the private investor. There are lots and lots of layers to this. The upfront money that everyone's institution has been offered is a lovely thing, but that is not the deciding factor for us on whether we're going forward with this deal or any deal.
Yes, I think a lot of the questions Sarah raised, we have raised too. Number one, we have not made a formal decision. We feel like we don't have enough information to make a decision, and we're still gathering facts. But certainly, we've raised those questions. We feel like we need a lot more answers before we can make a formal decision about this process.
And so just to reiterate, ACT's position has no position on this particular decision. Our main interest is ensuring that Full due diligence is performed by all boards, and our purpose here today is just to provide a forum for this type of discussion to begin.
And if I could add another active point, which is basic chain of command, the president or chancellor reports to the board.
Yeah, so that kind of dovetails nicely with our next question, and that is, how do you address the view articulated by the Big Ten that the conference is a member organization, and as such, the presidents and chancellors have the authority to make these types of decisions? Parenthetically, we saw this manifest itself during the periods of expansion of the Big Ten.
I mean, sure, all day long, the presidents are the board members of that member organization, but the presidents and athletic directors are taking action on things that are of great value to the university, and that requires oversight. I mean, that cannot be delegated away because it's a separate organization.
Yeah, and in any public company, there's a materiality threshold. That's what really is the driving force of governance. And the materiality of this to the University of Maryland is that, as far as our system, which is comprised of a number of institutions, this will be the second biggest tangible asset on our books next to our endowment. So it's very material. And as I think Sarah said or Jay said, I mean, we opine on decisions that are in the millions of dollars. And here we're talking about something in the billion, even though it is a third party entity. We recognize that. But the consequences to the system and to College Park are very material.
And I'll jump in and just say, I think one of the things that's changed with intercollegiate athletics is the amount of money we're talking about is we are borrowing $700 million to renovate a stadium, just for example. Okay. If our athletic department wants to be a member institution of the Big Ten and be self-sufficient and on its own, they could not borrow that money based on their balance sheet alone. We are backing that with the academic side of the operation. So this is no longer a situation where these athletic departments are their own entities. They're coming to us and relying on us to back a lot of the initiatives that they're involved in. And when you talk about what we've spent in facilities and what we have spent on a head coach's contract, we are close to $1 billion in expenses in football alone that we've invested into football. So this is no longer just a nice little extracurricular activity. This is something we better have oversight on because we're going to be holding the bag. University of California, and I'm sure Jeff's aware of this, their stadium bond, the academic side, had to take over half of that $400 million, and they will be paying those bonds off to the years 21-12. I did not misspeak. 21-12. They will be paying those bonds off. So we better get involved, and we better have some oversight as to what's going on with the numbers we're talking about.
Thank you. The next question is, what types of information should boards reasonably expect to receive before evaluating a material decision like this? And how much time should a board be given to responsibly evaluate the decision?
I think you should expect all the information you need to make a good decision and all the time you need to make it. The boards are the fiduciaries of these institutions, and your responsibility is to handle those things. So I don't have a standard to give you. This deal on the table is something that is very complex that most board members need to learn about, the environment, let alone the details, and become educated on how this works. And that doesn't happen overnight. And board members should have opportunities to take all the time they need. No one can tell me what the rush is on this. And, as far as I can tell, we've got until 2036 to figure this out. That's a lot of time.
I would also weigh that I think boards should be able to hire third-party expertise, Sarah referred to that, to get an unfiltered view of the pros and cons of a transaction like this. And I think that is fundamental. And if your board's not doing that, then it's a one-way street.
One other thing I would say is because of all of the chaos surrounding intercollegiate athletics, the resulting effects of the House decision, the discussion among members of Congress that Congress needs to be involved. And as I've said, the dramatic change in media valuations, I've just thought that we're at a point where we really need to be leaders in gathering more information and distilling all of the factors at play rather than sort of drawing into the shell of the Big Ten. I think this is a time where we have to be involved in exploring everything that's around us, especially the crisis of intercollegiate athletics. And so from my standpoint, this is at a very early stage, and we need to move in that direction rather than the direction that we've talked about.
What are the risks to the broader university if a board does not exercise clear authority over major athletic decisions?
I mean, I think it can be endless, right? There's so many examples of things. If boards are not actively engaged in oversight of intercollegiate athletics and then these national level conversations as well. There's been several mentions in this conversation already about potential, future gambling scandals from things that happen. I mean, I could name a whole bunch of things, right? So I think in general, just like any other lack of exercising of fiduciary duty, oversight, care and attention to things that are happening with our institutions, there's high levels of risk. But particularly with something like this, given the dollar amount or the long-term implications for the conference and for our individual institutions, I mean, I think there's many different examples you could name.
I mean, reputational risk is huge. And we've seen it up close and personal at the University of Michigan relative to some activities that have gone on in our athletic department over the last few years, let alone the last, couple of decades. And those risks are real and can be material. And while people think it's amazing that I get awesome football tickets and I get to go to all of these athletic events at the University of Michigan, and don't get me wrong, I love doing it, but that's part of my oversight duty as well. And being there with eyes on what's going on as much as I can in our athletics department is part of the oversight duty that I hold. And for a place like Michigan, that is a big and very important part of our oversight.
We're getting very close to the hour now, and I realize there are people still in the queue. But I thought we might just give the last couple of question opportunities back to the panel. Are there things we haven't raised that?
Well, I wanted to
everybody
make
wants
an offer. I wanted to make an offer to receive some comments from my colleagues who aren't panelists here today. And one thing that was raised at our board meeting last month, and I'd like to reiterate, is we're interested in convening trustees who are interested in having a more thorough discussion of this. And while I don't have any details to share here today, I just wanted to put that out again, about an opportunity, whether it's hosted by the University of Michigan or perhaps in partnership with ACTA, on how we might come together and discuss this and other critical issues. This is too important to just be left out there in the vacuum. And so I wanted to just put that out there. Anyone is welcome to reach out to me. Easy to find if you Google me or go to Michigan's website. And then the other thing, University of Michigan and USC have been very vocal about where we stand on this situation. And we're certainly interested in hearing more directly from others on where you stand as well. And while this might not be the venue for that discussion, here again, I would encourage anyone who's interested to reach out to me or my colleagues to have a discussion with us about it more directly on where you stand, or to better understand where we stand. I would be happy to engage in that discussion.
Sarah, there was good reason we gave you the Martin Prize for Excellence in Trusteeship. And I like the idea that this can continue. Gabby, we're able to save those questions, aren't we? And probably share them with the panelists in case they would like to correspond with the individuals.
Yep, absolutely.
Michael, I think you should send our emails out if anybody, I'm perfectly fine if anybody wants
Sure.
to reach out to me.
Me too.
Yeah.
Me too.
I put it in the chat, but that doesn't work. So yes, if there's any follow-up, by all means.
Oh,
Please.
excellent. Thank you for that. And
I'll just close with one thing. Look, we're in the Big Ten. There's 18 schools. We all love our universities. We all have great passion for them, or we would not be on boards doing what we're doing. And at the same token, we want to beat each other's brains. Well, not brains out, but we want to beat each other on the playing fields, the rinks, you name it, pools, whatever it is. But I think we all share an idea of what intercollegiate athletics can and should be. I think we all want a level playing field so that, we'll know in true competition who is the best. That's all we can ask for. But I think we also know that intercollegiate athletics is here to serve the university, not the other way around. And I think it's important for us to remember that. It's important for us to remember how many great leaders in this country have come through intercollegiate athletics and learned leadership skills and life lessons through whatever sport it may be. And I think if we can perpetuate that the right way, we have that obligation to not only our institutions, but to each other, and to be a leader, as Jeff said, because the Big Ten has been in a leadership role for decades and decades and decades. And I think, Sarah, I will be happy to be part of conversations in the future. And like I said, we have an obligation. And if we don't take it seriously now, 20, 30 years from now, I don't want people to look back and say, well, hopefully I'm still here 20 or 30 years from now. I'm not as young as I used to be. But you get the point, is we have an obligation to future boards, future young people that are going to come through these systems. And I hope we do the right thing here.
okay. Sorry. Tom, any last thoughts?
No,
No.
very, very well said. Again, Michael, Armand, and Acta, thank you for hosting this, for fellow regents and trustees. It's really great to collaborate with you.
Well, I thank everybody who's on this webinar, including the ones that I can't see. And we'll make sure that we are able to share the questions that remain with the panelists. And Sarah, yes, let's discuss ways that we can continue to help trustees and regents fulfill their fiduciary duties. So thank you all for doing this.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
Guys, thank you.
Well.
I